I'm Connor Ruebusch, and if you are interested in the finer points of face punching, you've come to the right place. This is Heavy Hands. Hello, welcome to Heavy Hands, and a second Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. That's the next holiday, I suppose, that's coming up for us Westerners, and I hope you guys enjoyed your holiday season as much as we did, and we are looking forward to following that up with another brilliant weekend. Yes, the birth of our Lord, that's an important occasion, but how about the return of Ronda Rousey? Isn't that almost the same thing? UFC 207, of course, features Ronda Rousey versus Amanda Nunes for the UFC Women's Bantamweight title. Also, two other fights that both Pat and myself are very excited about. Dominick Cruz versus Cody Garbrandt for the Bantamweight title, and former Bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw takes on fan favorite John Lineker for what must be assumed is a number one contenders fight in that same division. Hello, I'm Connor Ruebusch, your host. With me is Patrick Wyman, and these are the three fights that we will be discussing on today's episode. All good ones, all big ones. Let's start with Ronda Rousey's return. Return. How you doing, Pat?
You're fantastic. It's you stumbling? You okay?
some kind of choke there. I don't really know what happened. I think there was like a Christmas ham bone stuck in my throat somewhere.
Oh, Christmas ham, man. God, I would love some Christmas ham.
I'm not a big fan of Christmas ham, to be honest. It's just okay to me.
You a turkey guy? Don't tell me you're a fucking turkey guy.
I would love to do like a goose, you know?
Okay, I can get on board with goose. I just think turkey is the most overrated of foods. Like, even bad turkey is, like, even great turkey is still objectively bad.
Fried turkey, Pat. You got to fry a turkey.
Yeah, I mean, but even fried turkey is still bad. Like, it's not, I mean, in the grand scheme of foods that you could potentially be eating at any given time, like, turkey is always going to be in the bottom half. Like, you can dress that motherfucker up, but it's still going to be a pile of shit.
Well, I don't know if I feel that strongly about any Christmas meat, to be honest.
Oh, well, that's where we differ, sir. That's where we differ.
I appreciate
I'm a spiral ham guy.
I appreciate your passion. Spiral ham all the way. Enough about Christmas meats, though, Pat. Enough about that. Let's move on to
talk about the real Christmas meat, which is UFC 207.
There you go. Oh, what a transition. You should be hosting this shit.
That is the segue of segues right there, my friend.
Definitely.
So Ronda Rousey's back. How do we think this is going to go here?
Back. You know what? I don't think I've ever had. If GSP came back on short notice for this event and was suddenly fighting, Tyron Woodley for the championship, I don't think I would question that as much as I have questions about Ronda Rousey. Which isn't to say I doubt Ronda Rousey's abilities, or I don't know what she's capable of, but I think probably not since GSP has there been a champion level talent with confidence issues, blatant confidence issues, as dramatic as Ronda Rousey's. And unlike GSP, she doesn't have Faraz Zahabi and Greg Jackson to help her over that hump. So I really don't know. Ronda Rousey could come back and blow me away. She could come back and just really make me sad a week after Christmas. It's completely up in the air to me. It feels very, very unpredictable. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good read on this fight. There are a lot of variables here that are hard for us to get a read on the basis of what we have in front of us in terms of film and interviews.
Yeah.
We have very little in the way of interviews with her because she's obviously refusing to do media in the run up to this fight. That's between her and the UFC. That's fine. Like that, it is what it is. But it limits the amount that we can kind of read into that. Also, she hasn't fought in 13 months. The loss was apparently devastating for her. She told Ellen DeGeneres that she considered suicide in the aftermath of the loss. It's hard to say how much she's been training or with whom she's been training because her camp is pretty much buttoned up, even to people who have been covering her since the very beginning of her amateur career. People like Brian Martin, who has known Ronda forever and has never had trouble getting access to Ronda, even when it was hard for other people. Like that, even guys like that can't get access to her anymore. So nobody really knows what's going on with her. She could come out looking like $1,000,000, or she could be totally and completely broken still and just doing this because she has to. Like we just don't know. I mean, and that's the hard part here. You mentioned the coaching aspect of it too. Normally in a matchup between elite fighters, the coaching is going to be more or less a wash. Like because we assume that most fighters at that level are going to be coached by people who know what they're doing. That is not the case here. Edmond Tarverdyan, for lack of a better description, does not know what he's doing. He's a joke to every other high level coach in this sport. He's rapidly becoming a joke outside.
Can we talk about that? Because there was a sudden onset of everyone agreeing that Edmond Tarverdyan was a joke. For a little while, Ronda seemed to be making some improvements. She basically went from someone who had never struck to being someone who was starting to show some boxing ability, started to work behind a jab. That was mainly it, but that was a good improvement for her from someone who was just a two-hand swinger before that. And then almost suddenly it seemed like everyone was agreeing that Edmond Tarverdyan was kind of ruining Ronda Rousey's potential. What is the evidence of that? What makes you think that Edmond Tarverdyan specifically is such a big part of her failure to develop?
Okay, so first of all, shitty cornering, really, really bad corner advice.
No question about that.
That's not just that is not just in her fights, it's in every other fight that we're hearing him corner in. It's bad advice, bad advice, bad advice, bad advice. At best, it's unhelpful. At worst, it is actively detracting from his fighter's chances of winning the fight. So I think that's just the most obvious piece of it. There are also the problems with his personal life, that he seems to have a really strange codependent relationship with her, or kind of a Svengali type of deal. Reports from people who have trained there, and like just the results too. Like he has taken fighters who have some talent, and the results have not been up to par with what you would expect from talented fighters. Like Jake Ellenberger, Travis Brown, like they have not gotten better. It's not that they're not getting things like Jake Ellenberger looks like kind of a better fundamental puncher. Travis Brown throws punches better than he used to. It's not
Ellenberger is also back with Cordero now too. So
now he is, yeah. But it's that he seems to have no strategic grasp for how to win a fight. I think that's the most worrisome thing. That he does not seem to be putting his fighters in position to know how to win outside of small tactical exchanges. Does that make sense? And
yeah,
so
definitely.
I think that all of a sudden, as long as Rousey was still winning, we could look at what Tarverdyan was doing and say, well, he seems like kind of an idiot, or he gives bad advice, but she's winning. What are you going to do? And then when she lost, and you heard the advice that he was giving in the corner, the way that they all reacted to it, it seemed there was no way to avoid what was staring us in the face, which is that he's a shitty coach. That was the Occam's razor explanation for everything that we were seeing, was that he's bad at his job.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. It kind of reminds me of back when I was a teenager and I was coaching swim lessons for one of my jobs, and there were a lot of swim lesson instructors who never gave students any sort of concepts, never gave them any sort of overarching ideas to help guide them in the water. Never told them what their goal was supposed to be, and didn't really seem to know on that larger level, but would make a lot of very specific corrections, like straighten out your arm during this part of the stroke. No, straighten out your arm. No, come on, straighten out that arm right there. And just over and over make these little technical things so that in the end, about 3 or 4 areas of the stroke look like they have been coached. They don't necessarily look correct because the swimmer doesn't really understand what they're trying to do. And so there's not a smooth sort of purpose behind everything that is happening in the stroke. But the little areas they focused on have been corrected. And when I look at Ronda Rousey, that's what I see. I think I described her on r/MMA as like a Picasso painting of proper boxing technique, where it's just everything's kind of like there are a lot of things there that definitely look like someone taught her. The way she lifts her shoulder when she punches, the way she snaps and turns her hand over really dramatically. Those are all things that you wouldn't do unless someone told you to do them. But they don't fit together in any kind of cohesive way. So exactly. It does.
When you look at video of her hitting pads, it's clear that she has been trained to do it that way. Because
on the
she does it the
pads,
same
she
way
looks
every
smooth.
time.
Yeah, on the pads, she looks pretty smooth, even if things are off. But that's the thing is, it's like that. It gives you the impression that that's what Tarverdian is focused on, making her good at hitting the pads, making these small corrections, and then you put her into a fight, and it's just very different. The end product doesn't have that purpose behind it. So yeah, that was. I mean, it's a testament to how talented Ronda Rousey is and how weak the division is. That how huge those problems were did not become apparent until the Holly Holm fight.
Well, so what I realized in the lead up to this fight, because this is the first time I've really looked hard at the entirety of Rousey's career since this loss, is how many of these problems were visible beforehand, but they were only in such short bursts. The fights were so short, and the results were so clear that there was no reason to get hung up on them, or if you weren't looking hard for them, they weren't there. So like Betch Correia, for the 31 seconds or 34 seconds that fight lasted, however long it was, like Correia was doing a pretty good job of sticking and moving.
Oh yeah, I was excited
getting out of the pocket.
When that fight began. I was excited and then immediately felt stupid for getting excited because I'm like, "Ooh, Betch is doing the right thing. She's taking angles. She's working her jab. She's trying to throw in volume and fight off the back foot. She's out." It was
It turned out that like there was no way for Correia, a relatively inexperienced striker, to keep and somebody who was much smaller, much less physically gifted, much less athletic, not a power puncher in any way, shape, or form, to carry off that game plan against, like, to overcome the physical disadvantages she was facing against Rousey.
Likewise with Alexis Davis, and then the two most athletic people that Ronda faced, Kat Zingano and Sarah McMahon, were not mentally focused or technically skilled enough to compete with Ronda in specific areas. Both of them kind of throwing themselves into areas in which Ronda, was superior.
McMahon had been fighting professionally for like 2.5 years.
Right.
At that point, like I don't think she had passed the 3-year mark of her career when she fought Rousey.
And the less said about that Zingano fight, the better, I guess.
Yeah, Zingano who knows what Zingano was thinking at the start of that fight. But like McMahon, and if you go back and watch that McMahon fight, McMahon had some success. Especially when McMahon had some success fighting her in the clinch. McMahon had success landing in transition.
She landed 2 or 3 good right hands.
And I think the thing that ties all of this together is that Rousey is not especially fond of getting hit and does not react well to it. It does not react well to it.
Yeah.
So she can come in with a plan or with an idea of what she wants to do. But the second that she gets hit or gets hit cleanly, like, it kind of builds up in her head, and she gets in her head about what needs to happen next. So she responds to getting hit with more aggression. She isn't Brock Lesnar, where she kind of shies away and has to figure out, okay, what can I do now? What can I do? Panic, 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 panic. Ronda's panic takes a different form. Ronda tries to drown her panic in aggression.
It's fight or flight, and she chooses to fight.
Yeah, basically, like that. Fight or flight reduces a whole array of possible responses to a simple binary. But in this case, the binary is real clear. Yeah. And Rousey chooses to stick in there because it's like she has to prove to herself that she's not afraid, that she can take the shot.
Yeah.
And so that's when she starts charging after you. The result of the home fight kind of blinded us to the fact that for about the first minute and a half, 2 minutes before Rousey really got hit, she was doing a pretty decent job of cutting Holm off. But the second that she had a flush series of shots. She had a straight left right to the nose, and then she had a left elbow as she stepped in, and then everything kind of went to hell in a handbasket after that.
Well, yeah, each time she got hit by Holly Holm, she ratcheted up the aggression a little bit, or kind of plastered a mean look on her face or a maniacal grin and tried to give Holly the impression that she was okay. And each time you do that without then quickly finishing the fight or hurting the opponent, the attitude change becomes more and more hollow, more predictable, easier to pick apart. And so Ronda Rousey starts, each time she gets hit, she reacts in a predictable way. And the more times she reacts in that predictable way, the more predictable it is. And so each time that Holly Holm hit her, it was basically a sort of an avalanche effect. Each successful strike by Holly Holm opened up the opportunity for many more. And Ronda just got worse and worse as the fight went on.
Yeah, it was like watching her break in real time. Was pretty stunning to watch.
One of the most dramatic narratives I think I've ever seen play out in the octagon. just in front of us, like the character story of Ronda Rousey falling apart.
Yeah, like it was all there on display. Like, you know, it revealed some fairly deep aspects of her personality that, you know, I guess if you were real sharp, you could have seen them. You could have seen them beforehand, but there was no reason to. I think that's like there's a lesson in here about analysis, and that's that, you know, maybe you need to keep an eye on those tiny little things, and maybe they'll turn out to be nothing, but maybe they'll blossom into full blown panic mode, and when somebody's put under pressure.
Yeah,
like I guess that's what makes a fighter like John Jones so special, is that we've seen what John Jones's breaking point looks like and how he responds to it. But Rousey, like when Rousey was put to her breaking point, she shattered into a million little pieces.
Yeah. You know, it occurs to me, and we'll move on from this because obviously we're not supposed to be talking about Holly Holm. But what strikes me as really interesting is that Ronda came into the fight coached by or coached as a sort of fighter who was very focused on a few very specific things and didn't have an overarching strategic grasp of how to win a fight. And Holly Holm came in as a fighter who's pretty much just an overarching strategic grasp of how to win a fight, but ended up using that skill to beat Rousey only because she came in with a few very specific defenses in mind. If Holly Holm had come into that fight, same game plan, same skill set, and not specifically trained pulling out and blocking her one arm in the clinch, then she may have lost as the same as every other opponent, where we say, well, she had a few moments, but then she got submitted.
Well, there's a way in which the Greg Jackson style of coaching was perfect to defeat Ronda Rousey, because his whole idea of game planning is how do you avoid the specific points like that lead to everything bad that could happen to you, right?
Right.
So and these are, you'd be surprised at how specific these points are, but it's like letting Rousey get her hips below yours in the clinch, letting Rousey clinch you against the fence. Like when Rousey has you on the ground, you want to avoid this one specific spot because that one point branches out to everything else that Rousey wants.
Right, letting her cross your arm across your body, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's all like those little things, and so in a way, it was kind of easy like when you break somebody down to like 3 points that you need to avoid. That's kind of that's not hard. Like What was really striking to me in the aftermath of that fight was because I was in Albuquerque like a week and a half or 2 weeks after that happened, and talking to all those guys was how easy they thought it had been to game plan for her. Like they were not approaching this like, oh my God, this was such a huge challenge and we all rose to the challenge. It was like, no, we needed to do these 3 things. We did them, and that put Holly in position to win the fight. Like,
it's like matter of fact for them.
Yeah, I mean, and not just because that's the way they are, though they are kind of like that. They have a very matter of fact approach to those things, and very businesslike, very professional. But it's not like, but it wasn't that. It was just that, like, you know, I have talked to those guys about matchups that were much more complicated. This was not one of those complicated matchups.
Yeah.
So, but at any rate, leaving that aside, so how do you think Nunes matches up with her? What do you see as the key points in this fight, Connor?
Man, I can very easily see a lot of different things happen here, and that's why this is so hard for me, because Nunes to me is almost certainly the hardest hitter here at women's bantamweight. Maybe Sarah McMahon packs similar power, but Nunes is certainly more accurate and more efficient with her striking technique. So she is definitely the most effective puncher probably in this division. I mean, 9 wins by knockout. That's pretty good for a women's bantamweight. That is pretty damn high. And then a lot of those that would be knockouts end up being finished by submissions. So she can obviously handle herself on the ground. Very effective from top position. Though I don't know how much that'll be a factor against Ronda. But the point is that Amanda Nunes moves well, sets up her shots well, has good timing and accuracy, and it hurts when she hits you. And so for like 5 minutes, I could really, really see a repeat of the Holly Holm fight. Nunes is not exactly the same fighter, definitely more of a boxer-puncher than Holly Holm is, but she can do a lot of the things that Holly did. When she beat Sarah McMahon, she did a lot of the things that Holly typically does. Circling, throwing straight punches, using that little moment of hesitation to take another angle. When they turn to face you, you hit them while they're turning. Basic stuff like that Nunes did very, very effectively. So if Ronda Rousey comes in essentially unchanged, or basically the same technical fighter and slightly worse off mentally, which I think is very possible, then I kind of feel compelled to pick Amanda Nunes because at least I know she's in a pretty good place mentally, or at least seems to be, and she has the exact same skill set or something very close to it that beat Ronda last time. But if Ronda comes in and just doesn't go crazy after Amanda Nunes for the first round, I think her chances improve dramatically because Amanda Nunes, I can't think of another elite fighter about whom it has been so easy to say they have stamina issues. And I know we were talking about this a while back, Pat. I think you were saying you were hoping it would improve, at least in some kind of noticeable way, after she officially became a full-time fighter, which I think happened...
it was after the Zingano fight.
Okay, after the Zingano fight. She became a full-time fighter. She goes in there, she beats McMahon and Baszler. She has these 2 great first-round finishes, typical Nunes stuff, possibly, or definitely looks slightly better technically. Then she fights Shevchenko and gasses in the second round. And it was maybe like Conor McGregor with a focus on cardio. She maybe pushed back the gassing point about a minute and a half, but she definitely slowed down and just sort of hopelessly lost the third round to Valentina Shevchenko, despite pretty much beating her up for 2 rounds before that. And so if she only gets 1 round against Ronda Rousey, who is definitely tough, physically at least, who is a power puncher in her own right, and who has the grappler's equivalent of a puncher's chance in how amazing her judo and her submission skills are, then that is why I worry about this fight. I feel like I should pick Amanda Nunes, but how often do I ever feel comfortable picking a fighter who I kind of know is really at their best only in the first round?
Yeah, that's the real conundrum here, right? I mean, Nunes is a burst fighter. For like more than anything else, I think whether it's on the feet or on the ground, I would say that's what defines her game. It's killer instinct, hurting her opponent and pouring it on for the finish.
Yeah,
that more than anything else is what defines her as a fighter. It's what she has built her game around. It's finishing ability. She is a fucking killer. The moment that she smells blood, like that lioness nickname is pretty fitting for her. Like when she smells blood, she is not going to. She is going to keep going until the prey is dead.
Yeah.
That is the essence of what makes her good as a fighter. It's what drives her. It's what defines her. Now, that's also her greatest weakness, right? Like if she can't get the finish, then she's probably going to be out of gas real fast afterward. Because against Shevchenko, it wasn't that in the normal course of doing things she gassed out. It's that she bloodied up Shevchenko from the top in the second round and poured it on trying to finish her.
Right. Same thing that happened against Zingano. Moments from finishing the fight. One more shot landed properly would have ended the fight, and because it didn't, it ruined the rest of the fight for her.
Exactly, and that's a very similar. I like the McGregor parallel is actually a pretty good one.
Yeah,
I think that's the same kind of disease that afflicts both of them. They are both first and foremost finishers.
Can't turn it off when they see that opportunity.
Yeah, and it's their greatest strength and it's their greatest weakness too. So. Now, I think that's a thing that she has probably worked on over the course of this camp. Like this is, mentioned this earlier, but like ATT is a really, really, really good camp. She is a well-trained fighter. She has obviously made substantial improvements. She's got great sparring partners. I would imagine that they will have prepared her for what Rousey has to throw at her, So I'm not worried about that. I think from a technical perspective, there are ways in which she's actually a worse matchup for Rousey than Holm was.
Yeah.
I think Holm's movement and kind of broad strategic sense of where she is in the cage and why she's there is better than Nunes's. I think Nunes's footwork in the sense of the actual tool that she has at her disposal is better than Holmes's. I think she cuts better angles. I think she pivots better. I think she has a better sense of timing with her footwork for when to pivot. I think she's better at being efficient and staying in the pocket after taking a shot. So like there's a sequence that Nunes really likes where opponent comes after her. She cuts a slight sidestep, throws 1 or 2 shots, then pivots out, but stays in range and throws another combination, and then she exits out. It's basic boxing, but it's a sequence that Nunes is really, really good at. So if Rousey comes at her, Nunes is going to be able to punish her for that in a way that Holm actually kind of couldn't in the pocket.
Right.
Like Holm made her pay But then Holm couldn't really make
she
her
had
pay
to
for that.
she had to get out of dodge. She's ducking under a big left hook from Ronda, and Ronda's falling over. Holm is not there to punish her for it.
Yeah, precisely. And so if Holm could hit Rousey hard enough to knock her game plan out of her head and knock her confidence out of her head, Nunes is going to make her find religion.
Yeah.
That's how hard Nunes hits. Nunes is going to launch Rousey into another freaking dimension.
If Ronda comes in with anything like the same old approach. Running into Holly Holm's punches is part of what made them so effective. Can you imagine running into Amanda Nunes' right hand?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But conversely, if Rousey decides she wants to play a more patient game out in the middle of the cage and not come after Nunes, she's going to be dealing with somebody who sets a really long distance, who can exploit a really long distance, who has a good jab, a good kicking game. Nunes, I think, can indefinitely stand at range and throw 6 or 8 or 10 strikes a minute, and kind of chew Rousey up. I don't see how Rousey wins a fight that's contested at long striking distance. So, but then even if it gets into the clinch, Nunes is a much more dangerous clinch fighter and a much more effective clinch fighter than Holly Holm is. I mean, probably, I guess, except for anybody other than Sarah McMahon, right? That Rousey's faced, Nunes is probably the best clinch fighter.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not a great selection. Ronda is really, I think, levels above, but Holly Holm, who is, I think, a worse clinch fighter than Ronda, came in just with a few very carefully prepared defenses and managed to neutralize what Ronda brought to the table. And I think, the thing that makes this difficult for me to reckon is that Amanda Nunes, again, feels like the pick, but I think really over the course of her career, we have seen that there is nothing worse to do against Ronda Rousey than to go nuts looking for a finish. That is exactly what she has capitalized on with most people. And for Amanda, will she be vulnerable if she goes for the kill? During the process of going for the kill, yes. That is when Ronda often gets that big throw or locks in the arm or lands the big punch and those kind of crazy things when the opponent's kind of desperate to get her out of there before she can get them. Although I doubt Nunes feels the same kind of pressure that Holly Holm did now that, Ronda's kind of been exposed, as it were. But with Nunes, it's even worse because most people are not as vulnerable if they don't get the finish or if they don't get finished while going for the finish. So even if Amanda survives but doesn't put Ronda away, each time she survives but doesn't put Ronda away, she's going to come out of that exchange worse for it. She's going to come out more tired because she will have gone for the kill so earnestly that it will have drained some of her stamina. So that's the question mark for me. Is that Amanda Nunes' inherent style, the thing about her that makes her so great, the gambit style of going for the kill the way she does, is, as you said, especially in this matchup, though, the best and the worst thing for her.
Yeah, because Rousey, it's weird that, I mean, she's fighting somebody who we have seen panic, right?
Yeah.
And so, what happens when somebody who feeds off her opponent's panic is fighting somebody who we have seen break like that before?
Yeah. I think the best way to fight Rousey is the way Holm did it, not with the exact same techniques and everything necessarily, but just being very methodical. Holly Holm pretty much didn't look for the finish. She kind of just, until Ronda Rousey was clearly out on her feet, she didn't really look for the finish. She just hit her shot, got out, and set up the next one. And that is the way, if Amanda Nunes were to fight Ronda Rousey that way, even for the round it might take to break Ronda Rousey, that would be brilliant. But I'm not 100% confident that Amanda Nunes can do that. Yeah,
that's a good question. I mean, I don't know with the way that Nunes hits that it would take a round. That's why.
Yeah, maybe not.
That's why I'm picking Nunes, is because I think if Rousey comes after her the way that she does, and I think she will, then Nunes, Holm hit Rousey 38 times in that fight in about 6 minutes. If Nunes hits Rousey the way that Holm did 15 times, Rousey is going to be sleeping on the canvas. I really, really think that. So, I'm going to take Nunes by knockout in the first round. I'm perfectly prepared to eat my words if Rousey comes out and looks fantastic, looks like she's fixed her problems. but I don't know how you can trust the context in which Rousey is sitting right now, the people that she surrounded herself with, and her mental state. Like I can't get over that.
It's for me, Nunes, the biggest thing here is that Nunes is someone who, at least for a few minutes, can do what Holly Holm did. She's technically capable, except that she is about 20% more accurate and lands about 1.5 more strikes every minute, with about 2 times the power. So it is tough for me to see Ronda Rousey getting through that, but Nunes walks such a narrow line of success that, and Ronda Rousey, I mean, not to completely underrate her just since she's been gone. I mean, obviously, up until the Holly Holm fight, we didn't know that Ronda had these problems, and all the things that made her great before that are probably still there. You know, she's probably still a great athlete, and I'm sure she still has every bit of her incredible judo game. So question marks abound, but I am also going with Amanda Nunes, and I'm thinking a first round TKO is my pick. Is that what you're going with as well?
Yep, that's what I think is going to happen.
All right. Well, we shall see in just about a week's time. That's Ronda Rousey versus Amanda Nunes. But that is not all for us today. When we come back from this break, Bantamweight title fight. Dominick Cruz, one of the greatest fighters of all time, is taking on Cody Garbrandt, who Uriah Faber at least hopes will be the man to take on the mantle of Team Alpha Male. Although Dominick Cruz is probably hoping he'll take on the alpha male mantle in the same way that his predecessors did. In other words, not so much a mantle as it is a bridesmaid's dress, because that has been the curse of Team Alpha Male under men like Dominick Cruz and Demetrius Johnson. We will see whether or not we think that's the case after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. And we are back. Dominick Cruz, Cody Garbrandt. To me, this is the most interesting, most meaningful fight of the night. Not because I don't have respect for what Amanda Nunes and Ronda Rousey do, but because I'm a huge fan of Dominick Cruz, and the idea of Dominick Cruz diffusing a knockout puncher is very just titillating to me. I may have shown my hand a little too early there, but yes, I do expect Dominick Cruz to win this fight, and maybe that can kind of be the frame for our discussion, because I think, Pat, you and I are both in agreement about that. The expectation is that Dominick Cruz will have the upper hand.
Yes, I agree with that. Now, I think before we get too deep into that, we need to properly appreciate what kind of matchup this is for Cruz. So sure. I think Garbrandt is going to be the hardest puncher that Cruz has ever faced. He's probably the most athletic in terms of raw proprioception, speed, power, like all of this. I think that Garbrandt is probably the best. Like Demetrius Johnson is probably the fastest in raw terms that Cruz has faced, especially 2011 Demetrius Johnson. Yeah. But Garbrandt is so put together, and he combines size with that speed and athleticism. Like, Cruz had 5 inches and probably 25 pounds in the cage on Demetrius Johnson. He will not have those edges on Cody Garbrandt. So physically, I think this is probably the biggest challenge that Cruz has ever had to face in the cage. In terms of fundamental soundness, I think Garbrandt is also up there with those guys. Dillashaw was a different kind of striking challenge, but I think Garbrandt, in terms of his ability to get after you and throw a sharp jab, heavy right hand, a nice right hand counter, tight footwork in the pocket, Garbrandt is up there in terms of those challenges. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to sell Garbrandt short, I guess. Even if you and I are both on the same page in terms of what the likely outcome is going to be, right, we need to understand what kind of challenge Garbrandt actually presents. Definitely. Well, what kind of challenge does he present to you then? Not a big enough one to win the fight, I guess, is where everything kind of go in and undercut all that groundwork you just laid. Yeah. Well, so I think the basic point is that like TJ Dillashaw could fight hard with Dominick Cruz for 5 rounds. He was a multifaceted threat. He could throw volume. He understood obviously not well enough, but I think he understood what Cruz's angles and movement were trying to accomplish.
Yes.
Like, I think he understood the conceptual challenge that Dominick Cruz presented. And I think Duane Ludwig understood the conceptual challenge that Cruz presented, even if the tools that they tried to solve that puzzle with were not necessarily the right ones. I don't think Cody Garbrandt or the people coaching Cody Garbrandt understand the challenges that Cruz presents. On a basic level, I don't think they get what Cruz is trying to do.
It was like TJ Dillashaw was trying to explain, why he should win to a Portuguese speaker in Spanish. And Cody Garbrandt will be doing the same thing to that same Spanish speaker, but he will be speaking, Inuit. Like something totally foreign that I think he's just playing a different kind of game to Dominick Cruz.
Yeah, basically. I mean, and it's not necessarily, like this metaphor has gotten so overused of late, but like Cruz is going to be out there playing chess and Garbrandt is going to try to play war. Like at least Dillashaw was playing checkers, at least he understood that there was a board. Like, I think Garbrandt has a deck of cards.
Yeah. Maybe Uno cards.
Yeah, I mean, or hopscotch or something.
There's just not a lot of there's not a lot of depth to Cody Garbrandt's game, at least not that we've seen yet. But again, we also really haven't had the opportunity to see it brought out. Maybe the Henry Briones fight, which was more than a year. Well, no, not more than a year ago. Yes, more than a year ago at this point.
July of 2015.
Yeah. But every other fight in the UFC has been. Marcus Brumage actually went 3 rounds, but also was being destroyed the entire time. The last 3 have all been first-round finishes. Cody Garbrandt, statistically, technically, has a higher connect rate, lands more frequently with better accuracy than Dominick Cruz, yada, yada, yada. But how well can he actually keep that up for 5 rounds, against a fighter who is so very far above all the people he has been meeting? Like, I don't think Takeo Mizugaki, Tomas Almeida, and Augusto Mendez can prepare you for what Dominick Cruz brings to the table. It is, as I said before, it's like speaking an entirely different language, one that has no common roots whatsoever to what you've spoken so far in the past.
We run the risk with Garbrandt of looking at his record and looking at what he's done and failing to notice that they're all pretty good matchups for him. These are all guys, like, Garbrandt has had his career built to put him in this spot. It's not that these guys haven't been challenges. It's not that like, I think Almeida was the favorite in that fight, right? Not a huge favorite, but I think he was the favorite. I'm sorry?
And we both picked him.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I think I would pick Almeida again in that fight, but that was still a pretty good matchup for Garbrandt. Of all of the guys that he could have faced that were getting to that level, Almeida was a guy who was going to stand more or less in front of him, who wasn't going to use a lot of lateral movement, who was going to be happy to bang it out in the pocket with him, and who was a slow starter too, against Garbrandt, who's an exceptionally quick starter, who's ready right out of the gate to throw that right hand early and often. And a guy who was hittable, especially early, too,
What about Dominick Cruz's game is forgiving to Cody Garbrandt's skills?
Absolutely nothing. Yeah. Nothing about his game is forgiving to him. Garbrandt, like, I think especially in the pocket, that's where Garbrandt is going to want to win this fight, is in exchanges. When Cruz exchanges, he doesn't stand in front of you. Cruz will exchange. He will throw counters at you. He will stick around closer than he used to. Like, he used to just be an in and out guy. Constantly in and out, in and out. And now he will stay closer to you than he used to. He's more efficient like that, but you have to track him if you want to exchange with him. And there were points where Dillashaw did a pretty good job of that. I don't think Garbrandt has the tools to do that, to make his greatest strength play against Cruz in those spaces. I just don't think it's there. Like, he cuts nice, subtle little angles in the pocket. He's got pretty decent footwork. He knows how to move as he throws, especially like a slight sidestep kind of right hand. But that's a headhunting shot. Like you've got to be able to attack all three levels if you're going to give yourself a chance against Cruz. You're going to have to be able to counter to the body. You're going to have to be able to attack the space that he moves into. And Garbrandt, because everything he throws is basically straight, it's really hard for him to attack space. He's a linear kind of fighter. He's not a circular fighter. And to beat Cruz, you've got to at least understand the circular nature of his movement.
Yeah, definitely. They sometimes say that, stereotypes are rooted in truth or whatever, cliches are rooted in truth. I do think that is the case with the boxing trifecta, the classic style matchup paradigm that we've discussed in the past. And to me, you can take a lot of layers. There are many stages of each kind of fighter you could possibly have in this sport, and all these different permutations. But statistically, I bet if you looked at all of them, the formula would hold true 75% of the time. And so you can have Dustin Poirier, who is not just a slugger. Guy definitely hits hard and knows he hits hard, but there's a lot of depth there, a lot of different things he can do. You can reduce him to nothing but a slugger. And you can put him against Michael Johnson, who has won a lot of his fights swarming and applying pressure. But you can classify Johnson just as an outfighter, and still the outfighter, the boxer, will, I think, beat the slugger 75% of the time. That reductive attitude to fighting styles in the broad scope does hold true. And this fight feels to me like boxer versus slugger. That's the conclusion I keep coming to when I look at this. Is there a lot more to Cody Garbrandt than just being a guy who hits hard? Yeah, there's more depth there. There are certain skills that he does really well. And there are some athletic disparities between him and the average fighter that make that style maybe more effective than it would be for others. And are there differences between Dominick Cruz and just the generic outfighter? Definitely. Absolutely. There are so many layers and subtleties there. But the matchup is kind of just boxer versus slugger when it comes down to it. And I think the boxer, as the saying goes, the boxer wins that kind of fight.
Yeah, if there are guys who are sluggers, I think, who could create more issues for Cruz, it's just we have not seen the depth of skill from Garbrandt, like the depth or diversity. Things like again, I don't want to harp on it, but attacking space is just not a thing that he does. And he talked. So I was at a media day last week with Garbrandt. I was actually impressed by him. He's a reasonably articulate guy when he starts talking.
As long as he's not talking to Dominic.
Yeah, there is that. But yeah, leaving that aside, he has a good sense for when to take matchups. I think he understands the context of his career. And when he should take which fights and why, which guys he matches up with well and which guys he doesn't. It's not an accident, I think, that Garbrandt got more or less 5 guys who suited him, because those are fights that he wanted. Those are guys that he looked at and he picked out and he said, okay, these are, I think I match up pretty well with this guy at this particular point in my career. So I think he deserves some credit for that. But there's a difference between that and having the tools to fight somebody like Dominick Cruz. It's possible Garbrandt comes out and shows some stuff. It's possible he hits a now 31-year-old Cruz with a big shot and manages to put him out. That is entirely possible, but it feels an awful lot like a puncher's chance. Again, even if he were more inclined to work multiple levels, if he were more of a body puncher and more of a leg kicker and did a better job of putting his punches and his kicks together, if he gave Cruz some things to think about, but as it stands, you can't give a guy as smart as Dominick Cruz whose whole thought process is a flow chart of multiple options.
Yeah.
So few variables to have to take into account.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said flow chart. I mean, I'm watching Cruz's most recent fight with Uriah Faber right now, and there's this moment where he kind of steps in, he does that bump sidestep thing he does, turns it into a faked spin, comes in with a hook off of the opposite hand as he completes the spin, comes forward, lands a high kick, steps back in a stance change with that step, and keeps a jab so Faber can't follow up. And there's just this kind of, I mean, that's obviously a crazy sequence. That's a dramatic example. But the thing that stands out, whether he's doing that or whether he's just setting up a straight left off of a right jab, is that there is a great sense of flow to Dominick Cruz. Typically when we say flow chart, we're kind of talking about the variety of options. But Dominick Cruz is like an expert reader of the flowchart. It goes, the options build off of each other so effortlessly for him that there's a lot of depth, and Dominick Cruz is a great swimmer, basically. That he can explore his wealth of options more efficiently and more easily without having to put a lot of thought into it than almost any other fighter I've ever seen.
That's because he does all of his thinking pre-fight.
Right.
Like he can think over the course of the fight, but he's already picked out
their big questions.
What his menu of options is going to be in training camp. Like, I think there are a few guys who use their training camp better to build their approach for a particular fight than Cruz does.
Right. That's how. Oh, go on.
No. Go ahead.
Well, that's how Floyd Mayweather always struck me. Dominick Cruz reminds me of Floyd as a fighter who, I think was so used to just doing little small things in the pocket that he could kind of have the luxury of thinking. He never felt forced to think because all the responses were prepared. If you throw the right hand, I'm going to shoulder roll it and come back with the right. And if that misses, I can dip down to my left. I can bob under. Everything is systematic. And it's so systematic that it looks organic. It looks smooth and completely thoughtless in a way it is. And that freed Mayweather to think about the big questions. Should I be pressuring? Should I have my back on the ropes right now? How many rounds are we into this fight? When should I start turning it on? It allowed him to entertain the idea of strategy because the tactics were totally and fluidly automated. And that's how Dominick Cruz looks as well.
That is a really, really excellent point. So on the tactical front, I remember I was doing a pre-fight article on Cruz for the Washington Post back before UFC 199, and then I think I did a post-fight one. I think I did a post-fight one too with video of the Faber fight in there too. Mm-hmm. But basically, like, I managed to pick out 4 different sequences that built on the same movement in Cruz's game.
Right.
Say the pivot, the basic pivot on an onrushing opponent. So I found a pivot to combination, to punching combination. I found pivot to level change. I found pivot to fake level change to combination. Pivot to combination to level change. So that's 4 different series of things that are all potential options that all build off each other as a fight goes on. That are all based on one simple little movement. The beauty of Cruz's game is that it's all seamless. It all flows together. You can't prepare for Dominick Cruz's wrestling or Dominick Cruz's striking without preparing for the other. Mm-hmm. There are no boundaries in his game. There's no stark division between these things. You can't force Dominick Cruz into wrestling mode. You can't force Dominick Cruz into striking mode, because each of those things is inherently connected to the other. It's like it's a stunning kind of thing, and it's all bound together by the connective tissue of his movement and his footwork. And we had the privilege of interviewing him on that topic earlier this year, and it was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
How just deep his knowledge of these things is, and how hard he's thought about them, and why he does the things that he does. He knows all of this. It's nothing that he does or says is by accident.
He sort of just casually knows it all too. That's the thing, There are a lot of guys who know a lot of things, but they'd have to look over their notes to explain them to you. And that's not Dominick Cruz. Whether performing or explaining these skills, he has this encyclopedic, photographic understanding of his own game, where everything just comes when he wants it.
Yeah, and the fact that he can explain it too, I think is a big piece of it, because we talked to Demetrius Johnson and like we got really interesting insights from Demetrius Johnson too, who in terms of the way he fights is probably most similar to Cruz in terms of kind of the flowcharting nature of his game. But Johnson almost thinks too fast to be able to explain it easily.
Well, he either didn't want to or couldn't really explain specific techniques to the degree that Cruz could just easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's partially because Johnson doesn't care. Like it's also natural for him and also ingrained. And I think that like if he really wanted to, Demetrius Johnson could sit down and do that. But Cruz likes talking about that. I think because Cruz likes showing off how much he knows and how far ahead of everybody else he is.
But he enjoys it. Like, that's why he has this systematic thing that somehow never looks rigid. You know, it never looks predictable. You can have the same setup, but I bet you had to look at least kind of carefully to even see those 4 examples off of the same setup, because that setup doesn't like stand out in the same way each time.
Yeah, no, I probably watched 4 or 5 hours of Cruz.
And that's just pick that stuff out. And that's just 4. I bet you there are dozens and dozens every fight of little permutations like that. You know, your examples didn't even necessarily get into the different variations on the combinations. It was just like pivot and then combination. But what kind of combination? There's so much variation you could have even in each piece. Yeah. Which direction are you pivoting? Are you pivoting on the front foot or the back?
Is he anticipating a level change? Is he throwing an uppercut? Like, what does he think his opponent is going to do in response? Like, Cruz is just, I mean, he is a master of this.
Yes.
I mean, I think there are very few fighters who think about MMA as deeply as he does. I think John Jones does. I think Jones is just kind of a natural genius, but Jones doesn't care about explaining it to the layperson.
Right.
You know,
Cruz likes explaining it, and for somehow, you know, as an analyst, you know, myself, that it tickles me to think that the fighter, like, he really just delights in the process of analyzing something, but also that I think that it says a lot about why his fighting looks the way it does, why it's so unique from everybody else's, because he likes understanding why he's doing what he does.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, not to, like, again, we don't want to make it sound here as if Garbrandt has no chance to win this fight. There are things that Cruz does sometimes, like when Cruz gets real aggressive, when Cruz thinks he has you, sometimes he'll stop right in front of you. He'll stop his head movement. There will be some opportunities for Garbrandt to exploit. The question is, how many of those will there be, and can Garbrandt really exploit them when he gets the chance?
Right. And to me, like, the likeliest thing here is that Garbrandt will probably get a few opportunities where he does land that big shot, almost certainly. But I think that will create a positive change in what it'll probably be because of some error that Cruz has committed, and taking the shot, I think, will correct that error in Cruz. It's not like Nunes and Rousey where we're saying, how are they going to respond when they get hit? Dominick Cruz will sharpen up. You know, I've seen enough of his fights and seen him get tagged enough times to know that he will clean up his act when he gets caught and refocus on what he needs to do to get the fight back under his control. And so each of those punchers' chances almost make the fight worse if Garbrandt doesn't get a one-shot knockout, because his opponent will become incrementally more careful and harder to fight, and possibly more dangerous each time that he scores. So, yeah, to me, it's Dominick Cruz all the way. I think Cody Garbrandt, someday in the future, we will probably explore what is so impressive about his game and what makes him so effective. But in this, I look at these two guys and I keep coming back to the very basic analysis, which is guy who can move and box on the outside versus guy who can hit hard and knows it. And the boxer, he takes that one for me.
Yep. Yeah, I very much agree with that. I mean, and that's even leaving aside, like, we haven't gotten into issues of game planning or coaching or any of that stuff. Like, that's it. Yeah, I think Cruz by 49-46 or 50-45 unanimous decision is probably the easy pick. But with that said, I wouldn't be all that surprised if at some point Cruz managed to land a flush shot that Garbrandt didn't see coming. Garbrandt's known to be a little chinny. Or if Cruz just took him down so many times that eventually Garbrandt made a mistake in a scramble and gave up his back.
Yeah, and we may even see I feel like I know how Cruz will react if he gets shook or if he gets caught with a shot that, he has to react to. I don't feel like I know how Cody Garbrandt will react when he experiences what will almost certainly be a completely new and foreign breed of frustration. Because not being able to hit Dominick Cruz is not anything like not being able to hit another fighter. It's you can go in there against Takeo Mizugaki and think, okay, I didn't hit him that time. I'm Cody Garbrandt. I will hit him. It's like every time you miss against Dominick Cruz, you've got to lose faith because you missed really badly, and he hit you back right away and made you look really stupid, and then he was suddenly behind you, and you had to literally just laboriously turn around and meet eyes again with the guy who just made you look like a fool. It's a different kind of frustration. So we don't know how Cody Garbrandt will react, and maybe he'll fall apart as the fight goes on. He got 5 rounds against far and away not only the best fighter he's ever faced, but the best fighter the division he's in has ever seen. So
yeah, those all excellent points, because we know, like, we know Uriah Faber has been in enough of those fights that he knows how to stick around and he knows how to adjust, even if his solutions to the problems that he sees in front of him are not necessarily the right ones. We know he's going to stick around. We know TJ Dillashaw is a championship fighter and knows how to go deep into a fight, knows how to make adjustments, knows how to just to keep himself under control, stay calm, and take advice. We don't know how Cody Garbrandt's going to react if he's not in control from the opening bell.
He could react well. I mean, that is absolutely a possibility, but we don't know.
Yep.
And there's no reason to guess at it just yet. So, yeah, Dominick Cruz feels like the safe choice. And, whether he wins, I mean, if he loses, it'll be a huge upset. Even if he wins, it'll be a masterpiece. Watching him beat Uriah Faber, I wasn't really excited about the UFC 199 rubber match. I didn't think Uriah should have been in the title picture at that moment. Most agreed. And yet I came away from that fight just being thrilled at what I'd seen. Dominick Cruz is he's just a pleasure to watch, man. He is a pleasure to watch, and just to try vainly to understand what he's thinking and what he's doing from one moment to the next. It's great. So that's Cruz versus Garbrandt, co-main event of UFC 207, the main event, if you are a striking technique lover like I am. But next up, we have another bantamweight fight. We're going to take one more break, and when we come back, TJ Dillashaw, the former champion, is taking on John Lineker to decide who will be next to fight the winner of Cruz versus Garbrandt. We'll talk about that after this break. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. And welcome back, Dillashaw, Lineker. Pat, take it away.
Oh, be still my beating heart. Oh, my God. I love this matchup. Connor, do you think I'm crazy for thinking this is kind of a rough matchup for TJ Dillashaw?
No. Go on, please.
Okay. So I know you were not as far on the John Lineker train as I am.
Well, yeah. Okay, I'm going to say what I was going to say then, because as the guy who delighted in pointing out how John Lineker would be made to look a fool by Dominick Cruz, it should be quite clear that I have a hipsterish determination not to be caught up in the John Lineker hype train in the same way that everyone else is.
You are the no. It is a hipster thing to really like John Lineker. You have out hipster.
Oh, I've been the hipster of hipsters my entire life. So to the outside observer, I look like kind of a normal guy, but it's only because I avoid the things the hipsters like because I want to be even hipper than them.
Oh my God.
So being in that position, not being in love with everything John Lineker does, I feel like I see a lot of the flaws in his game. I still think this is a tougher.
But this has always been the problem with your analysis of John Lineker is you think that other people don't see his flaws. Everybody sees his flaws. Everybody knows the way in which he's limited. The whole point of enjoying John Lineker is in knowing what his flaws are, appreciating them, and still taking great joy in the fact that he knocks motherfuckers' heads off.
Yeah, there's a celebration of his flaws, and I get it because that's usually how I root for fighters. I mean, I wouldn't like middleweight if I couldn't celebrate flaws. That's for damn sure. It is purely, I like John Lineker's fights. I really enjoy them. It is purely in the same way that I always have to pick against Nikita Krylov, that I just have to be the counterbalance to that enthusiasm. But even looking at John Lineker probably more negatively than most do, or at least more ready to criticize, I think he's kind of a tough fight for TJ Dillashaw. I agree.
Yeah, that was all I was trying to get
What
to
a
here.
laborious way to get to that point. My
Yeah,
apologies.
of all there are a lot of guys in that division that I don't think are or that I think Dillashaw matches up really well with.
Yeah.
Um, I think Sun Tzu was kind of a tough matchup for him, and for different but I think like Dillashaw destroys somebody like Brian Caraway. I think he, as much as I love Aljamain Sterling, I think Dillashaw absolutely pieces up
Yeah.
Aljo. Who are some other top guys? I think Dillashaw beats John Dodson in a rematch pretty handily. I think even Cruz is not like I think Dillashaw is a pretty good matchup for Cruz.
We've already seen
sense.
they're a good matchup for each other in a way.
Yeah, I think with that said, I really believe Lineker is a pretty tough task for him, simply because of his power, his ability to stay in the pocket, his increasing counterpunching acumen, but more than anything, it's because his trigger is so quick.
Yeah.
Dillashaw is a guy who is going to be there to be hit. He, unlike Cruz, as much as he and Cruz get lumped together for their movement, Dillashaw is a much more offensively focused fighter, and Dillashaw is much happier to stay in range where you can hit him, because because his basic gambit is that he can deliver 2 or 3 times as much offense as you can. That's generally right. Against Lineker, you really do not want him to be anywhere near arm's length of you. That is a brutal spot to be with him. And if Dillashaw is content to kind of stay there to try and bury Lineker under a mountain of offense, he's going to put himself in position to eat shots. And you don't want to be eating John Lineker's shot.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I want to talk a little bit about those triggers. I think that's a great way to kind of get into what makes John Lineker so dangerous. I think I've talked in the past, I think, about fighting with a high guard. And John Lineker doesn't even always do that. But I've often maintained that a high guard is really at its most effective if you are ready to fire back the moment you block something. And I think that theory is true even if you're not blocking. If you get hit, the best way to be a hittable fighter is to fire back the moment you get hit. Really, even just the moment someone swings is to have those triggers ready. Because you have a moment there where somebody, they're in range to touch you, so you can definitely touch them. It's a very effective way. And if you don't have a great chin, or even if you do, it's maybe not the best or the safest or the smartest way to go about gathering that information. But you do know in that moment of being hit or blocking a shot, the other guy's close enough to hit. And it also passes a very strong mental note to the person who is swinging at you, that every time you swing at me, I'm going to swing at you 3 times, every single time. So either don't swing at me or get ready because I'm about to knock you out. And that is the kind of pressure that John Lineker puts on you. And I think it all comes down to those triggers. He's always relatively close to you. He's always ready to throw, and he's always ready to throw 2 more times every time he throws. And so there is just this sort of avalanche effect fighting John Lineker where, it's like, what can you do unless you are fighting the most perfect fight to get him to go away? Because you can't seem to hurt him. And in fact, trying to hit him seriously gives him the opportunities he wants to hit you back. And then getting away just kind of encourages him to come after you faster. So it's really it's a uniquely stressful experience for somebody who wants to fight from the outside. And that's why I think we've seen guys like Rob Font who go in there, fight intelligently against Lineker, have what appears to be a good game plan, and yet fall apart in execution. Michael McDonald, same story. Guys who just cannot maintain that game plan against John Lineker. And John Dodson had the most success yet, which is I think a huge testament to the talents of Brandon Gibson and Greg Jackson as coaches, because that's not something I would have ever expected to say about John Dodson before that fight, that he was the best outfighter yet to against John Lineker. But it clearly takes a special sort of titanic effort for a fighter who wants to stick and move and throw counter combinations to do that against Lineker.
Yeah, so because what ties all of this together, I'm surprised that we've gotten this far into a discussion about John Lineker without mentioning this, is just how hard he hits.
Yeah.
Like, my God. Okay, so I had coffee with Brandon Gibson the other day. I'm in Albuquerque right now, and we were talking about this fight. We were talking about John Lineker. We were talking about TJ Dillashaw. We were talking about John Dodson, how that fight played out. Dodson's forearms were black and blue for weeks afterwards, just from blocking Lineker's punches. And he said that one of the most stressful experiences, or maybe the most stressful he had ever had, was when he was backed up to the fence, knowing that Lineker was hitting his body and knowing that the next shot was going to come up top, and how badly he wanted to drop his hands down to cover his body as Lineker was hitting it. So it took a tremendous force of will from Dodson to be able to fight that kind of fight, to not eat the kinds of clean headshots that Lineker is prone to putting on guys. Like that. So you have to be tremendously disciplined to be able to fight him that way. And you have to know how much worse it's going to be if you drop your hands to cover your body. Like that, this is just an unbelievable force of will. So I think the basic question here is, can TJ Dillashaw execute that plan? Or if he's not going to execute that plan, what can he do to try and beat John Lineker?
Here's an option. Might he pressure John Lineker? Might he attempt to push Lineker backwards? And would that work?
He might try it, but I think one of the really surprising things we saw from the Dodson fight was how good a counterpuncher Lineker is as he steps back.
Yeah.
That was really surprising to me. We've seen Lineker throw counters before, but we haven't seen many times where he's like cleanly backstepping and taking angles as he's moving back as he's throwing.
Counterpoint to that. Go on. Finish your point, please.
I just thought that was a really good development from him. So when Dodson tried to get all bursty and come after him, Lineker was happy to throw back. He landed some of his best shots of the fight as he was throwing backstepping straight right counters over the top of Dodson's left hand. Yeah,
but you say bursty. I think that's the thing. Is John Dodson coming forward is always going to be a bursty fighter. It's not going to be sustained offense. And in that case, maybe John Lineker is like Conor McGregor. Second comparison to Conor McGregor of the show. That's how we get our SEO in, Pat. We got to get those Google hit numbers up. But John Lineker, in that sense, is I wonder how many layers are there to that counterpunching ability. I have a feeling that committing to a backwards moving style of fight is a bad thing for John Lineker, but that being able to step back and land one or two really cracking shots as you try to push him back is a great way to keep the other guy from ever figuring that out. In the same way that Conor McGregor, I think, is definitely vulnerable to pressure, but definitely very good at taking your head off when you start to think about pressuring him.
Yeah, okay, I'm with that for a moment, though. But I think in Lineker's case, his backstepping counterpunching ability is just a facet of the fact that he wants to hit you. That his overriding goal in any fight is to hit you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that failing that, Lineker is happy to plant his feet and throw at you. It's not like Hanen Barao. You remember a couple of years ago, we talked a lot about Hanen Barao and why Hanen Barao exchanges. He exchanges to stop you from pressuring him. That's not why Lineker hits backstep counters or plants his feet to throw. Lineker plants his feet to throw because he wants to hit you, because he wants to take your head off.
The whole reason he does anything is to hit you with both hands.
Yeah,
it's a different. I think it is. Lineker has that brawler's mindset where no matter what happens, he's going to try to take your head off and hit your liver so hard it flies out your back ribs. Like that is going to be
exactly
his goal at any given moment, no matter what the larger structure of the fight looks like. At every moment, John Lineker is going to be trying to kill you.
Yeah, as long as you're pissing blood when the fight's over, Lineker doesn't really care whether he wins or loses.
Yeah.
Like he's, that's why I don't think it can work, is because when you want to pressure a pressure fighter back, you're trying to get inside their head, right? You're trying to break them, to say like, this thing that you're really comfortable doing, I'm not going to let you do that. That doesn't work against Lineker because Lineker doesn't have a breaking point in that sense. Maybe I think Lineker probably does have a breaking point. We just don't know quite what it is. But it's not that you pressure him and you take him out of what he wants to do, because pressure for him is not his goal. Pressure for him is a means to an end. The end is him planting his fists on you.
Yeah.
That's what makes him a brawler.
I still have my suspicions that were Lineker to actually commit to a backwards movement for like a minute at a time, that it probably would affect his success rate to actually commit to that kind of fight. But I just don't know what you have to do to get him to do that. The problem is even just that first layer, he takes that back step and hits you. after that, it's like, I get the feeling that if you went in and kept trying to swing or land something to convince him to respect your attempts to pressure, he just wouldn't step back. And a lot of times that's a solution to what opponents want to do. You know, the pressure fighter who gets pressured, it's because he's willing to take a step back. He's too worried about his health, so he's willing to take a step back. A lot of times you can diffuse a lot of what people, it's like discipline, you know, like military discipline. You can diffuse a lot of problems that we've seen on history's battlefields if your soldiers simply just refuse to break. You know, if they just won't run and lose discipline. They hold formation. It's going to be really difficult to beat them, even if you have greater numbers. And that's the same way that if you have that sort of mental discipline in the face of someone throwing a punch at your chin, you can stare them down and just not move away and really show no fear. You can take away a lot of the reasons that punch at your chin is effective in the first place. You know, like landing the shots is not the only thing. Dictating the pace and the direction of the fight is a huge reason why fighters do a lot of what they do. And Lineker he diffuses a lot of that by just...
It's because he doesn't respond to negative incentives.
Right? He's like, willing to take the shots and just keep doing what he was already doing.
He's like, so you the parallel you drew is military tactics. The parallel I'll draw is my dog Lucy, right? So I love Lucy, but Lucy is a giant pain in my ass. Part of the reason why Lucy is a giant pain in my ass is because she's almost impossible to train. That's because her overwhelming sense for what she wants to be doing at any given moment it overrides any positive or negative incentive that you could give her. If you have treats in order to induce her to do a particular thing, maybe she'll do that, but only if she wants to do it. If you provide some sort of negative incentive, either you yell at her, or you decide, okay, if you do that, I'm going to go put you in the kitchen so you can't bother us anymore. That doesn't incentivize her enough to make her not do whatever the thing is. Yeah. You know, like so on a basic level, she breaks how dog training is supposed to work. If you don't respond to incentives, how do you incentivize someone to do something? Lineker, you can't negatively incentivize him because he's too tough, he hits too hard, he's too mean, and he's too focused on hitting you. So now with that said, I think I'm still picking TJ Dillashaw here because I think of the combination of the wrestling and the striking. Like, I think he will get touched up. I think he's going to get his eye blackened. I think he's going to eat some terrible liver shots. But I'm not sold at the end of the day on Lineker's takedown defense against a guy who sets up his shots as well as Dillashaw does. Like, if Dillashaw can use those angles in kind of a Cruz-esque fashion, if he can dart around a kind of a flat-footed guy and find angles from which to shoot effectively, then I think he wins a kind of a scary 29-28 decision. That's my pick for this fight.
Yeah, you know, it's funny we spend the whole time talking about why John Lineker is so dangerous, and then both of us end up picking TJ Dillashaw. Do you think it's a case of us chickening out, or is there something special that Dillashaw has that John Lineker maybe doesn't? What to you is the essential difference between them that makes you? Do you think it's the wrestling for you is the linchpin of why you have to pick Dillashaw?
No, I think it's the footwork and the angles. I think that Lineker has never fought anybody who moves as well as Dillashaw does. Yeah. And I think Dillashaw's footwork is best when he's moving forward, when he can put together these kinds of creative combinations in open space. But I think his footwork also works when you try to pressure him. I think he's got good instincts for how to pivot, how to stay away from the fence, for when and where to move, when and where to plant. He's got a height advantage. He knows how to fight long, and he knows how to work in volume. I think that's going to get him in trouble at a couple of points. I think he's going to eat some big shots. But Dillashaw, aside from that one big shot that Dodson landed on him back when he was effectively a novice fighter, I think he'd been fighting for a year and a half at that point. Dillashaw is not a chinny dude.
He's been uncrackable. He's taken some big shots too.
Yeah, so I think his toughness, I think his output, his volume, his variety, his footwork and movement. If he spent an entire camp knowing that he's going to have to fight a guy who wants to come after him, I think he can put together the right game plan and stick to it. I think he's a sharp fighter, coached by a series of smart guys. I don't think he's going to end up taking Lineker down for extended periods, but I think he can take Lineker down for long enough to break his rhythm and win enough minutes of the fight to win rounds.
Yeah, I wonder, does Lineker throw less against people who he knows can take him down? Not always, looking at fight metric.
Not really.
Yeah, how do you disincentivize John Lineker? It's like, what lessons can you teach him?
You can't, and he's so strong, and his hips are so low. It's hard to get in on his hips.
Yeah.
That's why I think the angles are essential for Dillashaw. Like if his plan is just to shoot a takedown whenever Lineker comes at him, Lineker's going to get his hips low and just shuck him off like it ain't no thing. Yeah. We've seen that increasingly from Lineker. He's got real good takedown.
The pressure probably takes away a lot of what Dillashaw is really best at. It probably means he can't kick, as effectively as he normally does when he can set up with the punch and get the guy moving backwards and set up those high kicks. But the thing is TJ Dillashaw, I think, is actually on a pretty special level in this division. I think he's a phenomenal talent. I think he's very sharp and very adaptable. And so while the strategy may not really change over the course of the fight, it may just be prevent Lineker from cornering you, or it may in fact be find an opportunity to press forward and try to pressure Lineker. Whatever the strategy is, it'll probably stay the same because John Lineker is not a fighter who changes what he's doing. He comes in there, he has a goal in mind, he works towards it for however many minutes he's given, or for however many minutes it takes before you're unconscious, or clutching your abdomen on the ground. But Dillashaw, the tactics for him can change, and I think that is where John Dodson had a lot of his success, is mixing up what hands he would lead with, what time he would feint and what time he would really throw, the combinations he would build, the direction he would move after landing his shot. Those are the things I think Dillashaw is uniquely equipped to do. To me, beating Lineker, it can't just be about strategy because, as we said many times, often strategy is about taking away what the other guy's good at, and it's just so hard to take anything away from John Lineker. He's going to keep trying. But tactics then become really important because you can't scare Lineker off, but I'm sure you can frustrate him. You can make him miss enough times and hit him back enough times that he kind of starts to feel silly, or he starts to really, really hope that you would just stop doing that and that you'd go away, and you just don't do that. You keep plugging away, you keep varying your attacks, you keep changing your direction of movement, you keep changing rhythms and speed and everything, and just sort of playing a game that Lineker technically is not equipped to play. And Dillashaw, I think, can do that. He throws actually rare in this division, but he actually throws more than John Lineker. He lands more per minute than John Lineker, statistically speaking. Slightly more accurate than Lineker. That may not be the case when his kicks are taken away, but then you add into that the option of going for takedowns, and suddenly you have this whole just wealth of options, I suppose, for Dillashaw to turn to. And as long as he can keep his cool, which I think he can, as long as he can keep his cool, then it really comes down to how confusing can you be with your tactics. And there's probably no one but Dominick Cruz who's better equipped to be confusing and be unpredictable when given the same scenario over and over for 15 minutes straight. So, yeah. I go with Dillashaw's technical resourcefulness is in the face of John Lineker's predictable relentlessness. That's what I favor.
Yeah, it's still this is still it bears saying one of the more dangerous matchups for Dillashaw out there. And we started this off by talking about Dillashaw, or talking about Lineker as a bad matchup for Dillashaw. I still think that's true, simply because that Dillashaw, when he's in range, can be hit, and he's going to be to carry off that kind of game plan. Dillashaw is going to be in range a lot more than somebody like Cruz would be, to continue to draw that contrast. Like, he's going to be there a lot more. So Lineker is going to get his shots at it. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Lineker knocked him down at one point. But I think at the end of the day, putting all of those different tools together, and especially the angles, like, I don't necessarily agree with you that Dillashaw is going to have his kicks taken away. I think that if he tries to stand in front of Lineker and kick, that's a really bad idea. But I think it's more likely that he throws a few shots, pivots off to an angle, and then kicks. Sure. That's something that
they'll be more restricted, at least. He won't be able to use them while he's retreating as easily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I think if he steps off to a new angle, he can land those shots.
Yeah.
He doesn't have as much raw quickness as Dodson did. Dodson got away with those kicks standing right in front of Lineker because he's so quick. Dillashaw is going to have to do a little more to set them up, but I think those are probably his best weapon. because he's going to need to try and stick Lineker outside. He's going to need to try and impose that distance and punish Lineker whenever Lineker is right on the end of his reach. So, but yeah, I think that's all going to be just enough for Dillashaw. I wouldn't be surprised if Lineker kind of walked him down and just like rock'em sock'em roboted him. But it seems less likely than Dillashaw finding some way to get it all done.
Yeah, I agree. Although this may be one of the many cases where where we say, so-and-so's a bad matchup, and then we end up being called or feeling like a chicken afterwards for not just going with the first thing we were compelled to say, which is that it was a tough fight.
Yeah, are we outsmarting ourselves?
I think that happens quite a lot, actually. Too smart for our own good, or too stupid to realize that keeping it simple is sometimes the best way to go. Maybe we'll never know, unless we're Dominick Cruz. Then we could really analyze ourselves. But alas, only one of us out of 7 billion is a Dominick Cruz. The rest of us just have to muddle on as best we can. That about does it for this episode of Heavy Hands. For some reason, I feel compelled to review the picks like it's a Sherdog roundtable. But we both went with Nunes, right?
Yeah, we both went with Nunes. With some caveats. I think that we both have our reservations about that. Far fewer reservations for both of us in picking Dominick Cruz over Cody Garbrandt, and perhaps we've both talked ourselves into a bad pick with Dillashaw over Lineker.
Yeah, maybe. It's hard for me to pick against Dillashaw, man. Though I have the kind of fandom for TJ Dillashaw that I think most hardcore MMA fans have for Lineker. That I just really, really enjoy every time TJ Dillashaw fights. It's an event for me. So maybe it's just clouding my judgment.
I don't think so. I think Dillashaw has not gotten the attention that he deserves as being really, really good. I think his breakthrough moment was supposed to be beating Dominick Cruz, and instead he lost a close split decision that has now gotten remembered as a clear Cruz win.
It's been retconned as a dominant performance for Dominick Cruz, even though it was a split decision. Justifiable split decision. Like, there were obviously split opinions in the world of MMA as well.
Yeah, it's gotten remembered like it's always fascinating to me which close decisions or decisions that weren't particularly close get remembered differently, and that is going to be one of the prime examples. Another one, like Gustafsson versus John Jones. People who have never rewatched that fight think it was like this razor thin, maybe even a robbery fight. It was not that close. It was pretty clear 3 or 4 rounds to John Jones. In that fight. Or Michael Bisping versus Chael Sonnen, which has gotten remembered as like a robbery win for Sonnen. No, it was a pretty clear 29-28 decision for Sonnen. But Bisping did better than people thought he would, and so this has gone down as one of those fights. Like, oh, Bisping got robbed, man. Bisping got robbed. Like, it's always interesting to see how those narratives play out after the fact. But Dillashaw, unfortunately, has been on the downside of that. Dillashaw, some of his real serious accomplishments have gotten downplayed simply because of the fact that he ran into a out for blood Dominick Cruz, who fought, I think, the best fight of his career.
It's Dominick Cruz. It was probably the best fight of his career, and he's one of the greatest of all time. It's not bad to lose to him. There's really, really should be no shame in that. So, yeah, I agree. TJ Dillashaw, he's my man. Maybe it clouds my judgment, but then again, I could counter that by saying I'm a big fan of his for a reason, and it is because he's so good. So, it is what it is. That does it for UFC 207 as far as Heavy Hands is concerned. We hope you all enjoyed that discussion. Of course, we will both be covering this one this week. As for me, I've got a Sherdog preview coming out soon. I'm going to be doing a short video talking about Ronda Rousey's loss and the difficulties she's gone through in lead up to her return. And I'm going to aim to do an in-depth breakdown of Dominick Cruz, because I haven't done enough of those. I probably will never do enough of those, just based on how much there is to analyze. But I'm definitely looking forward to putting about at least 2,000 words down, trying to understand why Dominick Cruz is so damn good at what he does. And that'll be it for me this week. What about you, Pat?
Oh man, I've got a fair few things coming out. I've got a complete guide to UFC 207 coming out on Bleacher Report. That should be out on, I want to say Wednesday. Yeah, probably Wednesday. I will have in-depth breakdowns of Ronda Rousey versus Amanda Nunes and Cody Garbrandt versus Dominick Cruz coming out also on Bleacher Report. Those should be coming out, I want to say, Wednesday and Thursday. And then I will have a in-depth piece on Nunes Rousey for the Washington Post, complete with lots and lots of GIFs. All of that good stuff should be out there, man, probably Thursday, I think. And then I'll be doing the live blog for the Washington Post Friday night. But that's it. I've got, and I think I'll probably have a new Fall of Rome out around the time we release this next episode.
Oh, that's it. Is that all, Pat? Is that it?
No, I've got a few other things going, but that's about it.
You're a real son of a bitch. You know that? This is this productivity has got to stop. We gotta bring it down a notch. Give the rest of us a chance.
I'm trying. Well, if you think I'm productive now, just wait, because my wife is going back to work and the baby is starting daycare the first week of January. So it'll be just me and Lucy at home. I won't have them around.
Oh my God. It's going to be, It'll be a whole new era in Patrick Wyman's productivity. It's true. A revolution.
I might just start a whole new show. Actually, I think I am starting a new podcast to go along with this. So
damn you. Oh, well, someday some of us will accomplish what Patrick Wyman will have accomplished in 2016 alone. But that is the way it is. That's what I knew I would have to deal with when I brought you on as a co-host, Pat. It's just the constant shame of the comparison.
Dude, that's messed up.
Thank you, everybody.
Wait. So we're gonna do a bonus episode next week, right?
Yeah.
For our Patreon patrons, $3 and up. Mm-hmm. New bonus episode next week. Probably our year-end show, our 2016 awards.
The heavies or the handies, whichever you think is a better term.
Probably the handies, because it's got that vaguely sexual connotation.
Yeah.
I think we had that discussion last year.
Yeah. I think we came to the immature conclusion. That seems like us. So the handies, I suppose, I can't say that with a straight face, will be coming out as a bonus episode next week. And that'll probably be a long bonus episode. Quite a long one to get through all of that. So typically they're a little shorter, although they don't have breaks, and they're kind of free form and maybe a little more fun and more relaxed. This one will probably be those things, but also much longer. I won't say much longer, but probably about 45 minutes to an hour at least.
Yeah, I would say probably 45 minutes is about right for that. We've got this is a good year for fighting. We got a fair few things to talk about.
Absolutely. So tune in for that. If you are not already pledged to us on Patreon, just a reminder that $3 a month does get you access to 2 or more bonus episodes every single month. So if you want about 50% more heavy hands, $3 a month is all it costs you. It's the price of a cup of coffee or whatever the cheap thing that you buy all the time. It's that. So just skip one of those things and do this instead. It's great. You'll enjoy it. We've been enjoying it, and we look forward to continuing putting those bonus episodes out as the future months come. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. UFC 207 is on the way, and we are both very excited for it. As you can see by the length of this episode, I have been Connor Ruebusch. Find me on social media. Twitter's the best way, at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. Patrick is at Patrick_Wyman. And you can get at us with any questions, concerns, whatever. Otherwise, we will see you all next week. Happy New Year. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.